Now, just before the news, we played Silence is Golden by the Tremolos as a Hank Marvin themed album. You're our oldies theme, by the way, today, Hank.
Oh, thank you.
And I guessed that it had been chosen because, famously, the Shads were an instrumental band, essentially, and you didn't sing. However, a whole bunch of people say, Simon, surely the Hank Marvin oldie Silence is Golden is because of the tremolo as used on Hank's guitar. That's trigger. Simon, I think you'll find it's because Hank uses his tremolo arm, even though they spell their name differently. Anyway, thank you, Neville. Simon, are you sure you didn't request Silence is Golden because of the tremolo arm Stuart Chambers in Stone Street? So what would you have thought there?
I think nothing. I tell you what, it's not a tremolo arm. I know what they mean. It's described as such by Fender, but it's a vibrato bar. It doesn't give a tremolo.
It's a vibrato
It's a
bar.
Like that.
That's the one. So I was right, and they're wrong. That's the way it goes.
And that's the way it always is.
Hank Marvin is here because his new album, Hank, is coming out on the 2nd. That's today, then.
That was yesterday.
That was yesterday.
Is
it the 3rd already?
You're way ahead of your time.
And it's just fantastic to have you on the show. Radio 2's got this big guitar season running. I mean, Jimmy Page is on the show tomorrow. And
hang on, I'm trying Jimmy Page. It rings a bell.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll come in a minute.
He's a fan of yours. I mean, he's one of the people who is down on record as, honouring you greatly and saying, you were the guy who was doing it first.
He's always been gullible. You know that. Great. I like Jimmy a lot as a player.
So but what's interesting, there are so many people, as soon as you do any kind of research into Hank Marvin, you come across the great guitarists who pay you tribute, Hank. Whether we played from Hank to Hendrix, Neil Young earlier on in the program.
Really?
Mark Knopfler. I was watching a whole bunch of Shad stuff this morning, and you quickly come to you playing on stage with Dire Straits. What was it that you were doing that was so influential in the early 60s that people still talk about it now? In your words, Hank Marvin, go.
This is a difficult one. Obviously, looking back on things that happened then, in terms of, guitar playing, that's what we're talking about, and the sound. The important thing was I, by accident pretty much, came up with something different in the approach to playing the guitar. We've mentioned the so-called tremolo arm. That was a big factor, Simon, in me developing a different style. This vibrato bar, because we had heavy strings on in those days, and for those who don't play guitar, heavy guitar strings make it difficult to bend the strings and put a finger vibrato on. A lot of guys now use lighter gauge, much less tension on the strings. But with the heavy strings, I found with the vibrato bar, I could put a vibrato on the strings, a bit like Harry Seacombe. Or I could...
Not at all like Harry Seacombe. Oh, that was, yeah.
That's better. I could dip the string, hit a note, and bend it down with the bar. I could give a shake. For example, the beginning of Man of Mystery, the introduction, it's got this wild, dramatic shake at the beginning. Only possible with this vibrato bar. So that gave me a new dimension, really, to playing the guitar. It meant I could express things more, get more expression into my playing, rather than just hitting a straight note. And that to me was important. I wanted to make it sound more like a voice, particularly when I was playing a tune, get some feeling and soul and expression into it. And then, of course, the Echo Box came along a couple of months later, which would added something else. And it seems that these guys that we've mentioned, many of whom were in Shadows bands when they started, just loved the sound, and they loved the way I played. It was probably different to what anyone else was doing at the time. And that's all I can say, really. Obviously, when you do this sort of thing, Simon, you don't do it with the intention of creating an influence on people. You do it because it either happens accidentally or your natural ability as a player is enabling you to play in a particular way that you hope people will enjoy.
So you came up with something that was different, but who were your big influences, Hank, when you were growing up and starting to play the guitar, when you were given one at a very young age? Who were the people who you would have loved to have emulated?
Clearly, Harry Seacombe, obviously.
Yeah. He was great with the Fender Stratocaster.
Oh, God, he was enormous.
He was amazing.
He was enormous. The guitar players that really meant something to me when I heard rock and roll were the early players. Like, for example, with Elvis, we had Scotty Moore. Did some great stuff on the early Elvis records, particularly that first album. Gene Vincent had a guy called Cliff Gallup, wonderful player. In fact, Jeff Beck did a tribute album called Jet Legs, I think it was called, or something like that. And Buddy Holly, Chuck Berry, James Burton with Ricky Nelson. You know, the style of playing that we heard then, Simon, was so different from anything that was coming out of the UK. Most of the guitar players here, as good as they were, came from a sort of dance, band, swing, jazz background, and it came across in their approach to rock and roll. It didn't really work. Whereas these guys, I mean, the rock and roll was based on the style of music they grew up in. Country, blues, rhythm and blues, all fused together to create this wonderful new rocking music. And that was the sound that I loved. And I tried to copy, failed, and ended up sounding like me.
Which is a blessing.
It is.
And a lot of people are very grateful for that. And this sound created before the Beatles, of course, they came along and changed everything. Is it true that George Harrison encouraged you to sort of stop playing all the instrumentals and become a vocal band?
He did. He was just jealous of my playing, yeah. No, seriously, we'd known the Beatles since beginning of 1963, and we'd spent a fair bit of time together partying, you know, visiting each other's houses, all that sort of stuff. And we both recorded at Abbey Road, where they were on Parlophone, we were on Columbia. And one day I was in there in 1965, and we had a hit at the time, which was, in fact, a vocal hit called Don't Make My Baby Blue. It was a top 10 hit, and met George, we had a brief chat. He said, I love the record. He said, you know, do you mind me suggesting something? I thought, I'm going to get a tip on, you know, playing here. And he said, I really believe that you should stop recording instrumentals and you should use this as a launching pad and continue with the vocals. He said, that's where it's going. And he was right in a way, because it was getting harder to get instrumentals played on the air, which meant, you know, harder to get a response and get a chart entry. Excuse me, but we didn't listen to him. I think he was absolutely right. We should have gone in that direction at that time.
But you still have an album full of hits. You're still the biggest selling instrumental band in Britain ever.
Yeah.
So it kind of worked out okay, didn't it?
Oh, it did. And look, in the long run, you know, we did all kind of things. As you know, the band broke up at the end of the 60s. I did TV series with Cliff. We had Marvin, Farah, reformed the Shadows, and then we had another lease of life. Yeah. You know, big album hits and a few single hits. So it was good.
So the new album is Hank. It has a summer thing. Well, you describe what you're doing on this record. Then we've chosen Daydream, which I think sounds fantastic. But just explain what you're trying to do here.
Okay. Well, the thought was to have an album of sort of instrumental summer sounds. There's something about the summer. So obviously, in the first place, I'm thinking, okay, let's think of some titles that reflect that thought. Some have it clearly in the title. It's Summertime Blues, Summer of 42. You know, maybe Good Day Sunshine. Some of the others indirectly associated, like Daydream. I've always thought of that as a summer song, and that lovely line in the song about burying my head or face in someone's new mown lawn. You don't do that often in the winter. California Girls, you know, you think of summer, surfing, California beaches, girls in bikinis, men in mankinis, this sort of thing.
I don't think of that. You've been in Australia too long, Hank. That's what that is.
Hey, man. So these are the thoughts. And then the second thing, Simon, is, okay, once getting a long list, because I had to cut it down to 14 tracks, is which of these tunes will really work as instrumentals? Sometimes they don't. You know, you have to be...
What's the difference between a song that does work as an instrumental and one that doesn't?
Sometimes, I'll give you an idea. There's a song called Boys of Summer, I think. Don Henley, is it?
Fantastic track,
yeah,
yes.
Great track. I love the record, but we kicked that around. It doesn't work as an instrumental. There's almost no tune. There's a chorus, but there's no tune in the verse. And you've got this guitar line in the intro, and unless you copy that, there's nothing really there to work with. Whereas these others, most of them have got good tunes, with one exception, and that's Message in a Bottle, which is a great guitar riff and a good chorus. So I could work with that.
But not a good tune?
Well, the tune itself, you think about it, you know, it's not really a great... It's a kind of... what would you call it? It's not exactly monotone in the tune, but it's not a good melody in the sense of, say, Daydream or California Girls.
Okay, so tell us about Daydream.
Sorry, Sting.
Yeah, I'm sure Sting can cope. So tell us about Daydream. Tell us why this works, because I think this is one of the standout tracks. Tell us why this works for you.
Well, first of all, I've always loved the track. It reminds me of like an old jazz song in a way, and I love the Love and Spoonfuls version. When this thing came out, I thought, I think I can do something good instrumentally with this. It's got a lovely feel. We'll keep it very simple, very low key, no big production on it, and that's the way we approached it. And I feel it worked well.
I think you're right. But then you're Hank Marvin. The album is called Hank, This Is Daydream. What's the guitar?
The acoustic?
Yeah.
It's actually a British guitar made by a guy who now lives in Scotland, Rob Aylward. It's a gypsy jazz guitar. And it just happened when we were working out the arrangement, I stuck that introduction on, and we used the intro because it sounded like a 1930s guitar, and I had to try to recapture it on the end, which we managed to. But it sounds a bit like a dobro, doesn't it?
Hank Marvin is here, Simon. Who's this? It's Tom Collins in Groby. The Shadows at the De Montfort Hall in Leicester was the first concert I ever saw. I was 12. It was 1979, and all I can remember, apart from it being great, was Hank at the interval saying he needed to go off for his injection. Did you use that line quite often?
I still do. And people still laugh. It's weird.
Chris in Devon. Simon, it's great news to hear Hank on the programme. I was wondering whether you could ask him about a really good song he worked on with Cliff called Silvery Rain back in 1971. I remember buying that record. Nobody ever talks about it, but it was a single. Hope you have time and take care. So it was like an environmental song, wasn't it, about pollution?
Yeah, I wrote that in 1967. We'd done some concerts in Israel just before the war broke out, funny enough, in Israel. We just got out there. On the way to Australia, I saw a book in the airport called Silent Spring by Rachel Carson. I'd read a bit about the book, and shall I buy it, shall I not? And then I didn't buy it, but it got me thinking about the environmental issues. And I started to write the lyrics in the plane about the idea of the silvery rain being the herbicide or the pesticide coming down from the plane, and what would happen to the creatures.
Wasn't there a Flyaway Peter, Flyaway Paul?
Flyaway Paul, yeah. And I sort of finished the lyric on the plane, and I had a bit of an idea for the lyric. And so by the time I got there, we finished it. Then we did it on Marvin Watch Farrow's first album. Then Cliff wanted to do it, which was great. Then Olivia Newton-John did it too. So I was very happy with that.
This from Vildine, who's one of our regular correspondents. Now, I wrote on the blog this morning that I don't know where this memory comes from, and it might be entirely wrong, but I seem to remember you having or affecting a theatrical cough while you were on Cliff's TV show.
Yes.
And I can't remember whether that's true, and I can't remember why, if it is true, why you kept on doing it. Can you shed any light on this? It was kind of that, which sounds really weird because it's just a cough, but where did that come from? How did that? It was almost like a catchphrase.
I know.
Cough.
I just did it, and people chuckled. And I did it again. They chuckled again. I thought I'll keep that in. And the writer said, "I like that." He said, "That's the kind of thing that people like. Keep it in." So I did. And hey,
showbiz has changed, Hank. You wouldn't get away with that now. They'd say, "Hank, it's just a cough." Mike in Leicester. Good evening, Simon and Hank. Just found myself doing the Shadows walk in the kitchen. What was that all about? You've done that forever, haven't you? And the great thing about it is that it's a dance you can do until you're 97.
Indeed. Although I don't do it much more. People look at me in a funny way when I do it now. But hey, look, that was part of our image, doing these little walks and kicks and all that sort of stuff. And hey, why not?
Jamie in Herne Bay. Simon, I saw Hank at Docklands with Jean-Michel Jarre years ago. I love his work. I found myself playing London Kid on bass from time to time. Seemed to be able to get a similar sound from it. Do you still get excited by picking up a guitar? And you were talking about the sound that you got all those years ago and how it was different. Do you still enjoy picking up a Fender and just experimenting and just trying to come up with new stuff? Or are you happy playing the old stuff?
Yeah. No. As on the new album, obviously it's a challenge because you're having to learn these tunes that you've never played before in some cases. You're having to arrange them, think of a way of playing them that gets something that's meaningful to the listener across. Yes, it's great. I enjoy the thrill of it very much indeed, and I enjoy playing the guitar. And when it works, I'm pretty critical of what I do, and I think, oh, that's just so rubbishy, and then occasionally, that's my first thought, and 3 months later I listen to it again and go, no, it's still rubbish.
Here's the most specific question which has arrived in the last few minutes. So could you ask Hank if he remembers stopping at the Winstay Hotel in Oswestry in Shropshire? Now, this obviously could get worried and think, where on earth is this going to go? My late mum was one of the cooks there, and she said that Hank used to come down in the mornings and just help himself to the bacon.
That's interesting. No, I remember staying. I'll tell you why I remember staying there, because Carol, my wife, her youngest brother was then the manager of that hotel. It was a lovely old hotel with a bowling green at the back. And first time I ever played lawn bowls in my life. Twice I've played it, and I became pretty good at lawn bowls, if you like idiocy. And it was a beautiful place. I remember there was a village just down the road which had 5 houses and 3 pubs.
Wow. You should retire there. Come back from Australia, Hank. We need you over here. Are you going to tour?
No, I'm not. Not at the moment, anyway.
Oh, come on.
No. Thanks for the offer.
What would tempt you?
Money and money alone. No, seriously. At the moment, I'm not really interested in touring, but I would never say never. I've learned to do that over the years, and I'm sure you have too.
The album is Hank. It's by Hank Marvin, as you might imagine, and it's full of summer instrumentals, and including a new track, Summer Guitar, which is a really nice track as well.
Thank you.
Hank, thank you very much, Lee, for coming in.
Hey, it's been a pleasure.